everyone. So in the world of research, pretty much every single breakthrough is built on the work of someone else. But what would happen if we didn't give credit where it's due? Well, today we're going to dive into the super important system of citations and acknowledgments. This is the very thing that keeps our shared knowledge from just, falling into total chaos. Let's get right into it.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to build this up from the very beginning. First, we'll talk about the basics, the foundation of citing. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how to cite data and figure out those different citation styles. And finally, we'll go beyond the formal stuff to understand the huge role of acknowledgments and even dedications. By the end of this, you'll have a really solid map of how to give credit the right way.
So I want you to imagine something. Picture a giant library, but every single book has had its cover and the author's name ripped right off. How would you ever know who to trust or whose ideas you should build on? Well, that's exactly the kind of mess we'd have in the world of research without a system for giving credit. This question is really the core problem that citations and acknowledgments were invented to solve. So the system that keeps all this chaos at bay is really all about giving credit. But, it goes so much deeper than just having good manners. It's really about scholarly integrity. It's about making sure that all of our collective knowledge is built on a solid foundation of honesty, transparency, and of course, a deep respect for everyone's intellectual contributions. And the most fundamental principle that fights off all that potential chaos is something called attribution. Our source material defines it pretty simply. It's just the act of acknowledging where an idea or a concept or a piece of information came from. You can think of it like leaving a little breadcrumb trail for every single idea, making sure that nothing gets lost or accidentally credited to the wrong person. Okay, so if attribution is the why, then a citation is the how. It's the official, standardized method we all agree to use to put that idea of attribution into practice. It's like a shared language. We all speak to say, hey, I built on this amazing work by this specific person, and here's exactly how you can go find it for yourself. So why is this whole thing so important? Well, the source gives us 4 key reasons. Let's use an analogy. Imagine you're building a house. Acknowledgement is like making sure you credit the architect who designed it. Credibility is like showing everyone you used strong, reliable materials to build it. Documentation is the blueprint itself, showing how the house was put together over time. And retrieval, well, that's just the street address, so anyone who's interested can come and see the house for themselves. Now that we've got the why of citations down, let's get a little more practical. We're going to shift into the how, and we'll start with something that's super important in modern research but is often forgotten: the art of citing data. In a lot of fields, especially things like engineering, data is everything. So citing a dataset is just as important as citing a research paper. And it's not just about giving a shout out to the people who did all the hard work of collecting it. It's really about pushing science forward. See, when a dataset is cited properly, other researchers can find it, they can verify your work, and maybe even build on it, which speeds up discovery for everybody. And check this out. This slide shows us 2 great examples of what this actually looks like. For the published data set up top, you can see it's got the author, the date, the specific title of the data, and a direct link. Perfect. And for the unpublished survey data down below, it's a bit simpler, but it's just as clear. Author, date, and a description. Both of them give you exactly what you need to track down that source. And here is the absolute key thing to remember about citing data. A URL by itself is not enough. We've all clicked on links that are broken, right? A strong citation with the author, the date, and the title acts like a permanent address. It makes sure your research stays transparent and verifiable for years and years, long after that webpage might be gone. Okay, so we know we have to cite, but the how can get a little tricky. And that brings us to citation styles. Honestly, the best way to think about these is like different academic languages. A psychologist might speak EPA, while an engineer probably speaks IEEE. They're both saying the same thing, but they have different grammar and different rules that are custom fit for their field. So let's start with one of the most common languages out there, APA style. It comes from the American Psychological Association, and it's pretty much the standard in a lot of the social sciences. Think psychology, education, sociology, where knowing who wrote something and when they wrote it is super important. APA style is what we call an author-date system. So while you're reading a paper, you'll just see a little citation in parentheses with the author's last name and the year it was published, just like this example here, Deb 2016. Think of that as a signpost. It points you to the full reference list at the end of the paper, where you'll find all the juicy details, following the template you see on the screen. Author, year, title, and publisher. All right, let's learn another language, IEEE style. This is the go-to for a ton of technical fields like engineering and computer science, and in these fields, the top priority is often keeping the technical information flowing smoothly without interrupting it to highlight an author's name right in the middle of a sentence. IEEE uses a totally different approach, a numeric system. In the text, you'll just see a number inside brackets, like 1. Each number corresponds to a specific source in the reference list at the end. And here's the big difference. That list is organized numerically based on when the source first shows up in the paper, not alphabetically by the author's name like in APA. This side-by-side comparison really makes the differences pop. You've got APA's author year right in the text, and that one little change completely reorders the reference list. Alphabetical for APA, numerical for IEEE. Even tiny details like how you write out an author's name are different. The big takeaway here is really simple. Just pick one language for your paper and stick with it. Be consistent. But what about all the help that doesn't really fit into a formal citation? You know, like a really helpful chat with a colleague or a lab tech who totally saved the day? That is exactly where acknowledgments come in. This is the special section where you get to thank the people and institutions that supported your work behind the scenes. So the acknowledgment section is your formal spot to thank all of those contributors. It's where you can recognize a colleague for their amazing feedback, a technician for their incredible help, or the organization that provided the grant money that made the whole project possible in the first place. So what exactly should you include in there? Our source gives us a really handy checklist. Now, of course, quotes and data from other people, that's usually handled with citations. But you absolutely have to acknowledge your funding sources and be specific, include the grant numbers. You should also mention any major technical help you got, any insightful conversations that helped shape your ideas, and even the use of special labs or facilities you were given access to. And you've got to understand, this isn't just about being polite. When we're talking about funding, this is serious business. As this quote from our source material warns us, if you fail to acknowledge your funding, you could actually lose that funding, and you might even be blocked from getting future grants. So the bottom line is, always read the fine print on your funding agreements. All right, to wrap things up, let's clear up one final, very common point of confusion, the difference between a dedication and an acknowledgement. I know they might sound kind of similar, but their purpose and where you put them are completely different. This slide here makes the difference crystal clear. A dedication is personal. It's a heartfelt tribute to someone you care about, like a family member, and it's placed right at the very beginning of a book. An acknowledgement, on the other hand, is professional. It's a formal thank you for direct, tangible contributions to the research itself. So you might dedicate your thesis to your parents, but you would acknowledge your professor for their guidance. See the difference? So let's do a quick recap of the most important takeaways. Citations are for crediting your formal sources. Acknowledgements are for thanking your supporters. You've got to know your citation style, the language of your field, whether that's APA, IEEE, or something else. Always acknowledge your funding. And finally, remember, dedications are personal, acknowledgements are professional. We started this whole thing by asking how we build knowledge without falling into chaos, and the answer is this really robust formal system of giving credit where credit is due. So I'm going to leave you with one last thought to chew on. How does this simple act of giving credit, when it's practiced by millions of researchers every single day, truly shape the future of all human knowledge? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.